And now on WRS, Michael McKay with the McKay Interview.
Hello everyone. I don't move in the elevated circles of those who attend and buy at the great auction houses of the world, but the business of art, fine art, beautiful jewellery, mega value, popularity, reputation, and the sheer theatre of the high-end international auction room interests me. Maybe I'm speaking for many of you listening today. I hope so, because my guest is a senior management member of one of the great names in the international auction business, a multinational corporation headquartered in New York City, but which was co-founded by one John Sotheby in London back in 1744. That makes it the world's fourth oldest auction house in continuous operation, predating both the republics of the United States of America and France, and established in Britain when George II was king. Nowadays, it's one of the world's largest brokers of fine and decorative art, jewellery, real estate, and collectibles, and it's a business that turns over close to $6 billion a year, from what I've read. That's a very significant number. David Bennett is worldwide chairman of Sotheby's prestigious jewellery division and regarded internationally as an authority in the field of precious stones and jewellery. He was once named among the top 10 most powerful people in the art world by the international magazine Art and Auction, and relatively recently named by Bilan, the Swiss business magazine, among the top 50 most influential people in Switzerland. Hello, David. Many thanks for inviting me and listeners to World Radio Switzerland to your offices here in the heart of Geneva. I've looked forward to this conversation, and I've many questions for you in the style and manner of the unexpert, but one very pleased to be in conversation with a master and practitioner. I hope you'll have patience with me, and for my sake and for our listeners.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very flattered to have been asked to take part.
It's good to see you, David.
Good to see you too.
We normally bump into each other on railway platforms. To begin with, I realise that you're a specialist in precious stones and jewellery, but just give me a sense of the big picture. Has the market, I mean the state of the global economy, over the past few years been good to you and good for you and the people who use your services? And who are these people, your customers and clients? Are they corporations rather than wealthy individuals? Please give us a sense of the scene in which you work.
Well, I think it's important to remember that Sotheby's is a deeply, if I can say that, a deeply international organisation. And the people who participate in our auctions, whether in person or by internet or by telephone, come from all sorts of walks of life and comprise many, many motivations for buying. From at one end, the financial people who want to buy as an investment, to people who want to buy just because they love the thing, they're passionate about the object, and also people who are collectors, want to forming a collection, want to extend the collection. We've had very good years. Certainly the last, I would say, 8 or 9 years have been very good indeed. We've seen a very large growth. Sotheby's Geneva has had some excellent years. We've seen, certainly in my world, in the jewellery world, in Geneva has been really in one sense, the worldwide centre of these sort of auctions of rare stones and rare jewels. And it's been a great pleasure to have been part of that. And, up until recently, in fact 96, I think 97, we were based in the Beau Rivage. And we'd been there for 20 years, since the first sale of the Duchess of Windsor jewels. But then, just over 2 years ago, we moved to new premises now, smack in the centre of Geneva, in the financial and banking district. In these wonderful premises. I love this building. It's just a lovely...
It's a magnificent little building,
isn't it? It's sort of succession almost, sort of early 20th century building. And so, which means for the first time, actually, since I've been here, and I've been at Sotheby's Switzerland, Sotheby's Geneva for 30 years, it's the first time we've managed to have the whole of Sotheby's in one building, which is
important,
great. Yeah. So it's,
David, as a corollary to my first question, does the market in which you operate vary much according to bull or bear markets? I mean, in boom times compared with recessions, and are the rich and famous touched by recessions too, in your experience?
Well, that's a lot of questions in one question. We're, as auctioneers, we're intermediaries. So the advantage of that is that wherever the market goes, in other words, whether it goes up or down, we're able to follow it, if you see what I mean, because we obviously earn our money on a commission basis. I've seen many recessions in the 45 years I've been at Sotheby's, and somehow sometimes our best years have been in what might not have been called the best financial years elsewhere. It's a very resilient business. I think because of this fact that we're taking a percentage as intermediaries between the buyer and the seller. I think it's been very, very good. Do we do better? I mean, clearly, in boom years, there is, I say, more money being spent generally. But as I say, there somehow seems to be a sort of a cushioning effect that, for after all, we rely both on buyers and sellers sometimes, can be the famous things about divorce, separation. People sell for all sorts of reasons. In my world, in the jewellery world, a lot of our private sellers sell because they've inherited. Great grandmother or mother's passed away and left the jewellery to the daughter or the son maybe, and they decide they want to sell, and so that's quite a lot of our sellers are motivated by that. Some of them need to sell. Few actually need to sell, in my experience. So a recession can have all sorts of effects.
You sort of partly answered my second question, which was whether your business is essentially reactive, and you said it is. But what I was curious to know about is how you know what will be valuable in the future as opposed to popular, or if in fact you can gauge that based on your experience. And when buying, how do you minimize risk as a broker, as an important middleman, or is risk minimal anyway in that position?
In the jewellery world, fashion does have a timing to it. One of the things I've observed is that there's a number of years in between when something goes out of fashion, and then when it comes back into fashion again, it then becomes a classic.
And is that predictable, that space?
Well, the space is getting shorter, I think. I mean, when I started in the early 1970s after university, at that time, Art Deco diamond bracelets, which are now highly sought after and very fashionable, were unconsidered, and we would be selling them in the London sale room. They'd be purchased by a member of the diamond trade, and immediately after the sale, all the diamonds would be popped out of them, and the metal would be melted down. It's almost unthinkable now, but they were so unfashionable. Nobody wanted to wear them. Nobody sort of thought they could possibly come back into fashion at that time. By the early 1980s, they were very much in fashion. And of course, what had happened was that a lot of the Deco bracelets that were around, that number had been reduced because of this lack of fashion. So anticipating what might become fashionable is, something that for people who have a long-term view on investment is something very useful to be able to do. But that period, and these bracelets were being made in the 1930s, so the 40 years later, they were completely out of fashion. By 50 years later, they were coming back into fashion and now are considered classic.
And have personalities got anything to do with that? I mean, is this led by a particular woman or group of women that wear these beautiful things
Interesting you should say that.
Start the new fashion again, or doesn't it really work like that?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because actually the answer to that is yes, and I'll explain to you why. Because there was a significant sale that Sotheby Geneva held in 1970. That's not 1970. How old I am? 1987. Which was arguably, and still is, one of the greatest jewellery sales of all time.
That was what?
The Duchess of Windsor.
Yeah.
She died in 1986. I was a relatively young. I was running Sotheby's London jewellery department at that time. There were two other colleagues of mine, and we made a pitch, as they say, for the collection and got it.
I guess I should add, for those listening who might not know who she was the wife of the abdicated King Edward VIII. Henry VIII, that's a Freudian slip.
He worried me from
that'll get me into trouble. Edward VIII who abdicated.
Exactly.
Sorry to interrupt.
Exactly. Well, she was a rather notorious lady for anybody. I mean, people, there probably aren't many left now, but people who, like my mother's generation, who were, getting married before the war.
My mother's too, yeah.
I mean, the Duchess of Windsor was a very notorious figure, highly sort of, notorious, I suppose, because, but nevertheless, Edward VIII, who's got me started, Edward VIII, who gave up his throne for this woman, also lavished on her some of the greatest jewellery in the world at that time. And of course, it was for us. It was a sort of an auctioneer's a gift from heaven, formed by the man who gave up the throne of England for love. I mean, that's a wonderful story, isn't it?
Great story. It's a unique story.
Yeah, great jewellery. Yeah. And at the same time, this each piece, each item in the sale, unbeknownst to nearly everybody, apart from us when we started first inspecting it. And I remember it so clearly, it's sort of engraven on my memory in the vault of the Banque de France in Paris. And, the first bracelet that came out was this wonderful ruby and diamond bracelet made in 1936. And on it was engraved, I think, "We are ours now," or "Hold tight," I can't remember which one. But nobody knew that these little very, very personal messages were engraved on these jewels. From the then king, he hadn't been crowned, but he was a king, to the woman that he was giving up for whom he was giving up the throne. I mean, it's extraordinarily poignant.
Yeah.
And anyway, to answer your question, why am I mentioning this? Is that sale, which was the first of the mega sales. There've been many Jackie Onassis. I mean, many of them since. Was the first to be fully worldwide media type.
I see, with television and film.
And it was something. It was the talk of the town. When we took it all around the world. The first stop was New York, where we had an exhibition before the sale, and the queues were literally all the way around a block. Can you imagine, to get through to look at these jewels?
And what year was this?
87.
87. Yeah.
And it just there were all the jewellery was made between about 1932 and mid-60s. So it's very much a period that I'm talking about. They're just beginning to become really the thing.
But my question is, and if it sounds like the novice's question, forgive me, did he have it made for her, or was this jewellery which had been acquired through family? I mean, was it designed for her?
No, this is what is so interesting about it, and why it was such a pace-setting sale. Was it I was responsible for the catalogue, which was no simple task, actually, because there was a huge amount of research in a very, very short period of time. And one of the things I did was I went to Paris to meet Jacques Arpels, who's now passed away sadly, but of Van Cleef and Arpels, and he was old enough to actually have been talking to Edward and Wallace in their premises in Paris before the war. And it was quite clear that Edward was designing these pieces with them and being heavily involved. He loved jewellery. It's very interesting, isn't it? And I got the feeling from talking to people like this that the jewellery collection was very much put together as a joint effort. And the gifts that he gave her were very much of a connoisseur, somebody who really understood jewellery. And that's why the collection was so extraordinary. The sale was an outrageous success. I mean, it was beyond a success. We had so many people wanting to come to the sale that we asked the canton if we could, or the administration of Geneva, if we could build a huge tent on the quay opposite the Beau Rivage, which we did. And inside it were, I think, 3 or 4 trees. It was so big, this thing. And that was not all, because then there was, a video link to another sale room at the Beau Rivage, a satellite link to New York and London. I mean, it was an extraordinary thing. This was all new, groundbreaking stuff at that time. Because auctioners had never really done that.
Exactly, fascinating.
And that's what's so exciting. And I remember, one of the great events I will never forget is that we opened, I wasn't taking the sale, My late colleague Nicholas Rayner, wonderful job, took the sale. And by the time we got to lot 15, we realised we had an extraordinary sale on our hands.
And how many lots were there, roughly?
Oh, I can't remember, 300.
I see. So 15.
And lot 15, I remember vividly, was a diamond set, dress set, cufflinks, studs, and so on, typical thing you wore in the 1930s, made by Cartier, estimated, I think, 20 to 30,000 francs. And it made 50 times the estimate, I think nearly $1 million.
Yeah.
And suddenly you had this fervour to have, of not only were the fervour to have these great jewels, but also have a part of this story, this part of this history which is now perceived, part of this love story for many people. It became an absolute thing, a must-have. I have to have something from that sale. So you had Elizabeth Taylor bidding by phone from her Malibu poolside to, making the most extraordinary competition for these items.
Amazing.
It was a wonderful experience.
So tell me, you've told me now that must be your most memorable moment.
One of them.
One of them. I was going to say, but I'd also written down here in my notes, what else is etched in your memory, and what were the surprises that sort of come back to you in your career, the things that you just didn't expect, apart from...
Well, there's quite a lot of things, sort of unpredictable things. The thing is about when you're up there taking an auction, I took my first auction in 1978, so it's quite 40-odd years ago. So you can imagine I've taken a lot of auctions since then. And, even though you feel that you've seen it all, sometimes you haven't, One of the, the Windsor sale was extraordinary, but there have been many, many others. Personally, for me, I arrived, as I think I mentioned, in 1989 here to run the European jewellery business. And immediately I wanted to sort of make a mark. And in the summer of 1990, I'd just been here about 5 months or something, I had a phone call from a diamond cutter who said, look, in Antwerp, I've got a wonderful stone I'd like you to see. So I said, okay. So I flew out, saw the stone. It was a 100 carat, the flawless diamond. So in other words, 100 carat, we can imagine it's a very large stone. The flawless means it was top colour and top purity. It was just perfect, it was a passion. And he said, so what do you think? Now, up until that point, nobody had ever tried. I think the most that any diamond saw was 6 or 7 million. This was going to be 14 million. So I said, what do you think? So I thought about it for a minute. You know how you just have that moment of intuition? I thought, yeah, I'll take it. He looked at me slightly surprised. And I said, yeah, I just think it's a wonderful thing. Let's give it a go. So I remember I got home that night. My wife was in bed, and she said, you seem worried, but what's the matter? I said, I think I've made the biggest mistake in my life, So he said, oh, come on, you always say that. No, I said, no, really, I've taken, risk. Nobody's ever made this, taken a chance like that. So anyway, so I managed to sleep. 2 months later, roughly, or a month later, actually, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. You remember?
Yeah, the markets all went...
Oh, I was, we were here. You were here, Gene.
I was living here, yeah.
Do you remember? My wife rings me up at work and says, David, there's no food in Migra.
Noga Hilton was closed. Yeah. Basically, the railway station had barriers up.
Yeah, people forget. It was real panic. Everybody getting their stocks in.
I remember, yeah, very much.
So I thought to myself, well, that's that then. So forget it, never mind. It was a nice drive. So, because the sale was in November. This was in, I think, October or August, maybe something. Yeah. So anyway, we start the road tour, take it to I can't remember where it was. I think it was in the Far East somewhere. And a certain gentleman comes in to look at it, and so I'm talking to him, and he's looking and he said, "It's very beautiful, very beautiful." So I said, "Oh yes." I said, "Is this for your wife?" He looked at me as if I was mad. He said, "No, it's not for my wife." So I said, "So you think it's an investment?" He said, "That's not why I'm buying it." So I said, "Well, tell me, why are you buying it?" He said, "Because how else can I put $14 million in my pocket?" And the interesting thing is that if you think about it, there's nothing else that, maybe you could get half for it in the most dire. But it's so portable and so, in a way, it's pretty liquid, isn't it? There's some part of the world.
Yeah, some parts of the world, yeah.
And I'll just tell you a very brief thing about that sale, because I got up to take the sale. The sale went quite well, got to the last lot, the 100K, ladies and gentlemen. 100-carat diamond due for us. The model gets up there, puts it on, looks beautiful. And bidding up, so I knock it down. There's a chap right at the back of the room. This is in the days 30 years ago, before we had what we call paddles now. Have you seen that? People are expected to bid with a paddle with a number on it.
Well, they do this.
In order to get the paddle, they've registered. Okay. So anyway, somebody's hand went up at the back, and so I knock it down to this chap. And next thing he does, he's gone out of the room. So the press are there, going up to the thing. Oh, congratulations, congratulations. Who bought it? And I didn't know who this chap was. What I didn't know was that the buyer had sent an agent, or an employee probably, to bid on his behalf. So there was that. You see, that's the unexpected that you don't know what's going to happen. You've got the high of, wow, world record price for a diamond, and then to, who bought it? Who was it? What flashes through your mind?
And the deal was closed. It was still.
Yeah, it was done. In fact, so a colleague of mine rushed out, found him just about to leave the hotel, and he said who he was and so forth, and then gave the name of the stone. So there's always the unexpected. It's very nerve-wracking at first being up there. The more you do it, slightly less nerve-wracking. But the unexpected, I guess, is what keeps you on your toes.
I can imagine. My guest today is David Bennett, worldwide chairman of Sotheby's Jewellery division, and we're in that famous auction house's Geneva offices. Let's talk a little bit more about precious stones. What is it in particular that really fascinates you about precious stones, precious jewellery, and why did you start in that? What was it that really hooked you?
Well, I'll tell you a secret. I wasn't really ever interested in jewellery before I started working for Sotheby's. Very briefly, after university, I did philosophy at university, and then I did a year's training in all the departments at Sotheby's, largely because my father, who was Victorian, really, born before your father, thought that I wanted to go and make films. I still do, actually.
And
so
he didn't have a very positive view of that as a profession.
Exactly. He thought it was Hollywood.
Yes.
So he sort of cunningly introduced me to a friend of his who was a director of Sotheby's, blah, blah, blah. One thing led to another, and I ended up on this 1 year's training. And about 7 months into that, there was the first oil crisis, and London was working 3 days a week.
That was 73, 74.
Exactly, yeah. And it was a disaster. There were no jobs suddenly. And so this friend of my father said, look, David, there's a job come up in jewellery. I said, jewellery? Why? He said, look, listen to me. You just take it. It's going to be a very difficult period. He was damn right. It became very difficult. Yeah. You need a job. And he said, it's going to be great. You'll be travelling a lot. There'll be sales in Switzerland and all these other things. I thought, yeah, okay, yeah, maybe that's right. And so that's how I ended it.
Now, can I ask you a question in particular about craftsmanship, which I'd like to understand a bit better? Are today's craftsmen and craftswomen still able to produce work of exceptional quality and beauty? And are you personally confident about the future of beautiful jewellery? That's being produced today. Where are these skills, and who's producing this beauty? I'm curious to know.
Well, the skills are still absolutely...
They're still there.
Yeah. I mean, modern techniques, involving lasers and so forth, have helped enormously. The most important thing is the inspiration. We've got, I think there's some wonderful stuff being made at the moment. Clearly one of the greatest jewelleries of the last 100 years is Joel Rosenthal, works under the name of Jar.
Jar.
Jar, Jar in Paris. Extraordinary, is on the level of Lalique and all these great jewellers. But every now and then one comes across something that is quite extraordinary. Maybe isn't even signed. So there's still great work being done, and the possibility of working with these metals and so forth is as good as it ever was.
So you're confident about that?
I am. Yeah.
And we talk a little bit about genuineness and authenticity in the business. How a great house like yours prepares itself and guards against the clever yet unscrupulous and the downright crooked. What goes on behind the scenes in your detective and investigative work that you can talk about publicly? How does that work in an important house like this?
Well, in my world of jewellery, the fakes are, I think, probably slightly less of a problem than they would be in the paintings department, for example. my close colleague Danielle Machetti have been, both have been working in the business for 40 years. We've written works on jewellery together, and spotting a fake is very often almost intuitive. There's something you can look at something and think, well, that's not quite right. There's something you can't. It's very difficult to put into words what isn't right about it. That's what's actually slightly frustrating for young colleagues, because you're trying to explain to them that this just isn't right. And they say, well, what isn't right about it? And you say, well, look, just look at it. It's not right. It's kind
and
of
it comes
like,
with time and experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're... The wonderful thing about working in a great auction house is the sheer volume of, for example, jewellery that you'll see in your career. I mean, it's just phenomenal, And it's jewellery, as they say, from soup to nuts. It's kind of like jewellery from $1,000 up to, what's the most, $72 million stone we sold.
Coming from all over the world.
All over the world, yeah. All dates, all periods. People don't sort of differentiate themselves for periods, but basically, Danielle and I have specialised in jewellery from about 1750 to the present day. In terms of the stones, that's another subject altogether. Ever since quite early on, coloured stones, particularly sapphires and rubies and emeralds, have been treated or heat treated. The Romans used to heat precious stones to change their colour. In the old days, in the ancient world, onyx, was a sort of chalcedony. It was boiled with honey, and to colour it. So, treatment of gemstones is not a new process, but it is a process that is now becomes necessary for laboratories and chemical analysis, and also spectroscopy. So there are laboratories, particularly in Switzerland, that deal with coloured stones, and of course for diamonds, you've probably read a lot about synthetic diamonds and so forth. There is the GIA, Gemological Institute of America, that is able to detect these things. All my specialists that work with me worldwide are qualified gemologists, and which gives us at least a first step of the process. And if we have the slightest doubt, we'll send it to a laboratory.
And tell me, a business like yours must have a unique perspective on reputation, obviously. You've been guarding it for over 300 years. Does modern digital technology give you any new reasons to be even more vigilant and on guard? And could you give me some examples of where and why you have to be especially vigilant in these modern times? I'm just curious to know how the technology of today helps, or in fact gives you reasons to worry in your business.
As I'm not quite sure, you mean worry about what, though?
The reputation, authenticity, being sure that you have made the decision that's correct in judging the value or the provenance, those sorts of things. Because the reason I ask the question is technology is changing so rapidly. I'm always curious to see how it affects different kinds of industries.
Well, I guess in my particular sector of what Sotheby sells in jewellery, certainly I guess the area that needs the closest watch is in gemstones, as I've said, because new treatments of gemstones, new ways of enhancing the colour and so forth are constantly being produced. So we have to keep an eye on that. But the digitalisation of the business has basically meant an immense expansion. All our sales now are also online, which means that it's an exponential growth in the number of people who can participate in a sale. As little as 3 years ago, I remember having only a few bids online. Now, nearly every lot has bids online. So you're getting such a large public, and it's totally international. You can have a sale in Geneva that is viewed by people in Tokyo or in the United States, and they will participate. Now with modern technology, you can sort of send not three-dimensional, but moving photographs, little films of each lot, if the client likes it. All of this has helped enormously in terms of the accessibility of what we're selling.
So it's been
because the biggest problem, of course, is that people want to see. Not
of course,
a problem.
you can understand it.
Want to see it before they buy it. So technology has helped massively for that.
In closing, why is Geneva special for you and Sotheby's? What's so special about this particular city?
Well, I mean, I've been here for 30 years. I'm now Swiss. I'm very proud to live in Geneva. I love Geneva. It's been very good for me personally. From Sotheby's point of view, it's principally, I suppose, in terms of the auctions, it's been jewellery and watches. I mean, at first we were selling in Zurich, and we moved to Geneva in 1980. And the effect of moving to Geneva was huge. I mean, the movement, and that was largely, actually, I've forgotten to say really the story, was that Geneva offered an absolutely first-class free port. So if people want to sell an important piece of jewellery or stone, they can send it to the free port, I can look at it before and decide whether to import it for sale or return it. And that really, that type of facility is not matched anywhere else in Europe, certainly.
Last question, David. Can you tell us anything, without telling us any trade secrets, about imminent plans? Anything that we should look forward to, those who can afford to look forward to it?
In terms of...
the business, your business, Sotheby's.
Here in Switzerland?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think we've made it fairly clear by moving to these new premises, in the Rue d'Ide, in the centre of Geneva, that we are, investing in Geneva. It's been very good for us. I think as long as the sales continue to progress and to sell as successfully as they have up until now, I think we will continue here.
Great. Many thanks, David, for making time and answering all my questions.
Thank you, Michael.
My guest today has been David Bennett, Worldwide Chairman of Sotheby's Jewellery Division. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
That was the Mackay Interview with Michael Mackay. And don't forget, you can hear that interview again on our website, worldradio.ch.